everybody, this is Molly Frendo, your instructor for Anthropology 103. This week we're going to be talking about ethnicity and race. An ethnic group is a group that's distinguished by the shared cultural similarities members of that group have with one another that make them different from other groups. Ethnic group members share beliefs, values, habits, customs, and norms. They might also share a common language, religion, history, geography, kinship, or race. One's ethnicity can be defined as identifying with and feeling like you're a part of a certain ethnic group. Some examples of ethnic groups one might affiliate with include Polish, German, French, English, Irish, etc. When we talk about culture, it's important to understand the concept of status. Status refers to any position that determines where someone fits in society. People always occupy multiple statuses, although particular ones might dominate at different times. Status positions that are specific, visible characteristics that categorize individuals on the basis of appearance are referred to as identity markers. Our brains like to try to make sense of the world based on what we see. It's a fairly natural inclination to try to look at others to place them. Are they male? Female? What race are they? Would we consider them to have a physical disability? Symbolic markers like a wedding ring or necklace indicating religious affiliation like a crucifix or a Star of David might also help us identify individuals as belonging to certain groups. Statuses come in primarily two forms, ascribed and achieved. Ascribed statuses are those that people have little or no choice about occupying. For instance, a person can't choose the color of his or her skin, and it's quite difficult to change the gender you're assigned to at birth. On the other hand, achieved statuses are not automatic, but result from actions, efforts, talents, activities, and accomplishments. Some examples of statuses that are achieved would be that of parent, athlete, college graduate, or business person. It's possible for individuals to shift their social status. Status shifting is described as adjusting or shifting one's behavior in response to different social contexts. We've talked about status shifting several times this semester already in terms of acting outside of one's social class and gender. We learn to status shift when we pick up social cues that we've broken the rules somehow or stepped out of bounds. We'll talk more about this concept when we talk about linguistic diversity. Many of us style shift from the ways we talk among our family and friends to when we're in the classroom. You probably don't talk the same way to your boss at work that you would talk to your significant other. Status shifting involves situational negotiation of social identity. We have to figure out what's appropriate. Many of you might be familiar with the concept of passing. Passing is best thought of as an individual who's able to seamlessly shift statuses to the point that no one calls them out for being an imposter. Often passing is done for that individual's protection or to gain benefits not afforded to a certain status. For instance, a gay man might status shift to give the impression that he is heterosexual if he feels he is at risk for physical harm. A biracial woman might be able to pass for Caucasian by adopting behaviors of the majority group. We refer to status groups with less power as minority groups, and those with more power as majority groups. In this instance, minority has nothing to do with number of individuals in that group or the size of the group. Referring to a majority group signifies that group has more power. This is essentially the same thing as our conversation on dominant culture groups at the beginning of the semester. For instance, people of color like Latinos or African Americans are considered minorities. When an ethnic group is considered to have a biological basis, it is referred to as a race. When members of a certain race experience discrimination, we refer to that experience as racism. Many people use ethnic group interchangeably with nationality. That used to be the case. However, nation and nation-state mostly refer to autonomous and centrally organized political units. A nation-state is best understood as a political entity like a country. A nationality is an ethnic group that once had, or wishes to have or regain, autonomous political status. You might think of a nationality as an imagined community in the sense that members of the community have things in common and share an affinity for each other that will never be in one place again due to the impacts of immigration, migration, and cultural sharing. National culture is the cultural experiences, beliefs, and learned behaviors shared by individuals who live in the same nation. Ethnic diversity can be associated with positive group interaction and coexistence, or it can be associated with conflict. To review, assimilation encourages minority culture groups to adapt the traits of the dominant culture. There are some benefits of assimilation, but largely, many traits are erased in favor of succumbing to the majority group. However, assimilation is not inevitable. Many ethnic groups choose partial assimilation and allow many ethnic distinctions to persist through generations of interethnic contact. The term pluralism describes a society that combines ethnic contrasts, ecological specialization, and economic interdependence of other groups. In this case, ethnic groups can peacefully coexist, especially if they occupy different ecological statuses. Within the multicultural model, cultural diversity, including ethnic and racial diversity, is good and desirable. Multiculturalism succeeds in most societies that value freedom of expression and in which there are many diverse culturally organized groups. However, multiculturalism requires a significant amount of work on the part of everyone to work. On the flip side of multiculturalism is ethnic conflict. Ethnic conflict can be based on race, religion, language, culture, politics, economics, etc. We can think of ethnic conflict in two primary ways. First, prejudice. Prejudice is the devaluation of a group based on assumed grouped characteristics. These fixed ideas are often called stereotypes. You can see many of these prejudices displayed in a Peggy McIntosh article you've been asked to read along with your book this week. This article often evokes a wide range of feelings, including guilt and anger. Please note that I don't assign this article to try to shame anyone. The article is meant to draw attention to the various privileges granted to white people that people of color do not experience. As a white woman, I can't escape the privileges granted to me by being born white, as long as our culture continues to exist the way it does today. I can, however, choose to be aware of the fact that this privilege exists and to remain diligent about doing my part to promote equality. Think back to the example we used during our gender unit. Men have the luxury of not needing to try to think about how to keep themselves safe in a dark parking lot at night. McIntosh is trying to make the same point that as a large group, white people have the luxury of being able to go into a store and shop without being followed. They aren't called out as a group as having certain negative attributes. Try to read this article with an open mind, and if it causes you discomfort, try to figure out why. The second is discrimination, which refers to practices and policies that harm a group. This can be either de facto, which is practiced but not legally sanctioned, or de jure, which is sanctioned by law. Three primary types of discrimination exist: attitudinal, institutional, and environmental. Attitudinal is based on prejudice towards the very existence of a group. The most extreme example of this is genocide, or the deliberate elimination of a group through mass murder. Institutional discrimination is often less personal and deliberate. It involves policies, programs, and institutional arrangements which differentially affect groups. Environmental racism is racism where minority groups are disproportionately affected by environmental hazards. The aftermath of ethnic and racial oppression continues to linger today. Ethnocide refers to a dominant group trying to destroy or erase the existence of ethnic cultures. Perhaps the most famous example of this would be the Holocaust. To a lesser degree, forced assimilation, refugeeism, and colonialism play a similar role in erasing ethnic cultures. Many groups have faced forced assimilation through the banning of their language or customs. Some of you might be familiar with the show My Big Fat Gypsy Wedding that follows the Irish Travelers group in the UK. Many in this culture have been forced to change their ways due to discrimination against their cultural habits. Refugees are people who have voluntarily or involuntarily left their homes due to ethnic expulsion or war. Colonialism is the political, social, economic, and cultural domination of a territory and its people for an extended period of time. Many people believe that race has a biological basis. To be clear, while race has some biological dimensions, the way that we understand race today is entirely social. Race is actually a matter of cultural categories and organizations. Race, like ethnic groups, derive from social contrasts rather than from scientific classifications based on genes. When an ethnic group is assumed to have a biological basis, it's called a race. To review, we tend to assign characteristics to groups depending on their identity markers. This continues despite scientific evidence that says these things are not natural. We relate moral worth and virtue to race, economic status, and political status. There are two basic ways that human biological diversity related to race have been described. The first was assigning human beings to racial categories based on common ancestry. This approach has been rejected by science and is no longer commonly used. The favored approach now is the explanatory approach, which strives to discover the causes of specific human differences. The elements of race that have biological dimensions are based on phenotype. Phenotype is an organism's evident traits. In the case of race, we use differences in melanin content within the skin, or phenotypical differences in melanin, to define different categories of race. However, it's very important to note that when we do this, we're not looking at genetic variation. Rather, we're making arbitrary distinctions that have nothing to do with behavior. Problems arise when any single trait, like skin color, is used to identify racial groups. Things like weight, height, skin tone, etc. vary widely in ethnic groups and might also change according to environmental factors. It's important to note that racism hasn't always existed. In the United States, racism against Africans by white settlers was the idea system that supported the socio-economic system of slavery. To break that down a bit, the social relationship in question with slavery was the one between the master and the slave, and the economic system was the profit system created by the selling of slaves and their labor. Because slavery was profitable, the notion that Africans were inferior propped up racist attitudes. Cognitive dissonance is a condition of conflict or anxiety resulting from inconsistencies between one's beliefs and one's actions. In order to avoid the anxiety of cognitive dissonance, slave owners looked for a way to justify the use of slaves in order to secure the continuance of a highly profitable socioeconomic system. The same is true in terms of European white settlers and Native Americans, as well as many other racial and ethnic groups throughout history in the United States and the world. To be clear, we should be careful to not view racism as an either-or thing. Racism exists on a continuum rather than just the categories of racist or non-racist. Silent racism still suggests that some well-meaning white people still continue to experience unconscious feelings of superiority. As we move forward for this week, check out the other video links I've posted in the unit to better understand the ideas presented in this lecture more fully.